Well, my name is Samantha Inoue Hart. Nice to meet you. This is my first time at Animefest. I'm really excited to be here. And, if you're here for Pitching 101, you're in the right place. I'm pretty sure there's going to be people coming in, so hopefully we won't have to repeat ourselves very often. As far as who I am, do any of you guys not know who I am? Okay, there's like a half of you. Okay, my name is Samantha Inoue Hart, but everyone calls me Sammy. I've been a voice actress for ADV Films since like '98 or '99, somewhere around there. From there, was also, did some voice acting for New Generation Pictures, Genie On, and over at Funimation, and now currently doing stuff for Sony Online Entertainment and a couple other places like Blizzard. I also have a background in animation, have been an animator since 1997. I've worked on a ton of projects. Worked on Layla and Stitch Part 2, got to work on Clerks, the lost episode for the 10th anniversary Clerks re-release DVD. Got to do some TV shows for Spike TV, one of them called Fresh Baked Video Games. So I've been around the block as far as animation. Have also kind of found my way into live action on camera acting. You can see me in a horrible Teddy on Sin City, and got to be a zombie in Grindhouse, and have seen me in probably an Office Space. I'm like token Asian in that movie Idiocracy. And several other films as well. But we're not here for any of the acting-related stuff. I'll have other panels where I'll be more than happy to answer questions about voice acting and acting in general. This panel is about pitching. And I'm probably sure that a lot of you guys have some story ideas that you want to make into like either a comic or a TV show or a movie and things like that. Well, actually, you guys are pretty lucky because we have a surprise guest that I'm going to drag up here on stage. That's you, mister. Come on up. Yay. Aren't you guys lucky? This is... fantastic friend of mine. I'll let you introduce yourself.
My name's Paul. I'm cosplaying as a producer, which is what I do. With Samantha, we're currently preparing to produce a feature animated adaptation of Tad Williams' novel Tail Chaser Song. You may have heard of that announcement. I've worked on a couple independent films, a pilot for Comedy Central, co-founded Ain't It Cool News, the company with Harry Knowles. Ran the company many years ago, wrote many years ago for it as RoboGeek. You can find me on Twitter as RoboGeek. Co-founded Fantastic Fest, the genre film festival in Austin, and worked for Guillermo del Toro. Managed his office for a while, did creative development on Hellboy and other projects. And there's a lot I'm leaving out, but that's a good starting point. I'm curious what the significance is of the color-coded microphones. Oh, that makes sense. Because I figured with the orange, I'm representing the Dutch national team today. So.
Yes. And I'm just the yellow menace.
You said it, I didn't.
I'm allowed to, I'm Asian.
So pitching is something I do a lot and have been doing a lot. I've been in basically in LA 1 week a month for a while now on projects that we've got going. We're in talks with Sony on a project and some other stuff that's going on that we can't talk about. But I've been on kind of both sides of the table, and so I have a couple kind of lessons and key rules of pitching that I will share at an opportune moment. But I think we maybe wanted to open it up for questions to see if any of you had any burning desires for fountains of wisdom that we will endeavor to provide.
Yeah, because if there's no questions, then we're just gonna talk your ear off about random stuff.
Yeah. If you ask a question I cannot immediately answer, I'm prepared with Calorie Mate. So then there'll be a pause, and I will take a bite, and then I will be in a better position to respond. So I'm just warning you. Yes.
It's going to be pretty broad, but where do you start?
Where do you start? Well, in the beginning.
What?
I guess that depends by what you mean by where you start.
You've got an idea for a concept.
Okay. So if you have an idea,
You can start first.
okay, I'm sorry. I think the first thing is to try to test your idea as much as possible. And this kind of jumps ahead, but ties into one of the things I've kind of learned from pitching. Everybody thinks they've got a great idea. Ideas are sort of a dime a dozen. In general, when you get to an opportunity to kind of pitch or present, whether it's a game or a film or TV series or whatever, more likely than not, they're at least as interested in your ability to execute the idea. So one of the best things you can do if you've got a great idea is to make sure, I feel like my voice is more boomy now. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. That was like freaking me out. Is to do whatever you can kind of concurrently with developing the idea to also being able to demonstrate how you can execute. There may be some things where it's just not within the realm of possibility for you to execute the idea, but I think you're in a better position if you can walk in not only with an idea, but a demonstrable ability to execute successfully. So that can be by doing short films, by doing level mods on a game, whatever you have access to that you can do to start showing that you can do stuff.
Yeah. Also, you might also want to start thinking about, it's like, okay, my story idea is pretty short. What would it be good as far as the medium? Whether you think about if there's like a lot of action and you have a fighting show, it's like idea. If you can't animate it, then maybe it's like a comic book would be like the best route to go into, or it's like if people who are really good at like animating, or then you might go the animation route. It's like go and make it into like a Dragon Ball Z show or a video game. But if you don't have access to either of those, then maybe like live action would be. So you kind of have to see what you have access to.
Another thing I'd add from a pure kind of development standpoint, kind of creative development story idea, finds people smarter than you to bounce it off of. It may be those people don't have time. I'm backlogged with things I'm supposed to read for people. But be persistent and don't put all your eggs in one basket. Do that. But also avail yourself of resources that you can find. Whenever I get sent, as I do periodically, something to read or look at, if it's somebody I don't know, what I typically say is, okay, before I'm even going to talk to you, go do this. And I send them to first read Kurt Vonnegut's 8 Rules of Writing, which you can Google and find, and it's been around a lot. There's another really great resource called WordPlayer. I think it's wordplayer.net. I may be wrong, but it's a couple screenwriters, Terry Rossio and Ted Elliott. They wrote the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and a bunch of stuff. They're very successful screenwriters. It's an amazing free resource of essays and columns that give very specific practical advice and guidance for aspiring screenwriters, and includes sections on pitching and on notes and the kind of things that you'll encounter. And the more you can arm yourself with knowledge like that that's available, it's just going to move you that much farther ahead.
Okay, awesome. Oh, let's go with you.
The site is WordPlayer. I think it's wordplayer.net. It's a pair of screenwriters, Terry Rossio, Rossio, and Ted Elliott. And they're a screenwriting team that have been around Hollywood for a long time, and they're great.
Okay, and about screenplays, like if you're doing a movie or trying to do a television series, let's say movie.
Okay.
Assuming that you have never sold a screenplay before, when you first do it, you need a full screenplay right out of pitch. I mean,
Yes, I mean by and large. I mean with rare exception. If you're an established, you kind of have wider doors open to be able to go pitch something because again you've demonstrated an ability to execute. But out of the gate, probably you're not going to get taken seriously with just an idea, with just a pitch, because it's like, okay, that's great, but then we'd still need other people to write that, and those people that we'd need to bring on to write that, they have their own ideas. So why do they need yours? So there's not a deficit of ideas, although it looks that way sometimes by what's being made. They're just a lot of bad ideas, but it's a lot about execution. But the other thing I'd say for screenwriting is read screenplays. Read as many good stuff as you can to kind of build a frame of reference and just even understanding basics as far as formatting and all the kind of essential things. Because if you're going to send something out and it has amateur mistakes, it makes you look like an amateur.
Yeah.
So you don't want to have formatting errors or God no spelling errors or grammatical errors, because in any of these cases it's a transaction and you're asking people to give you some of their time that is valuable. And so if you can't make the effort to give something that's really polished and that doesn't have sloppy mistakes, it says I'm not valuing your time because I didn't take the time to make sure this was presentable before I put it in front of you. So that's basic common sense, but sometimes that's stuff that is worth reminding people of.
Yeah, typically if I see any grammatical errors, I'm like, push it away. So yeah, so.
I did mention also television. If somebody was to try to fit into a TV series, how many scripts would they need? Like maybe the first 5 episodes or what?
I'm actually in talks with Sci-Fi Channel right now on a TV series, a pilot that I wrote. I've only written the pilot, but we've mapped out the series. And the TV is a very different world than film. Film, you have the whole independent scene where you can make a film on your own and you don't need anyone's permission. And you can put it out there on YouTube. You've got like a lot more freedom. TV is much more sort of controlled because, and I won't go on that tangent, but it's a lot harder to break in. One of and this is advice that isn't particularly helpful, but a lot of the way it works, and this goes into my second big rule of pitching. By and large, whenever you're going to be pitching to somebody, most decisions on the other side of the table are based on fear. Fear of like taking an unnecessary risk, fear of looking bad to my boss, fear of losing money, fear of losing my job. And so there's a predisposition when you walk into the room where the safe answer, the safe response is to say no to your pitch, because that maintains their sort of metaphysical status quo and it doesn't expose them to new risk. So one of the challenges of pitching is to go in there and try to persuade the person that the opposite is true, that it's actually riskier for them to say no than to say yes, that if they pass on this, they're going to regret it, and also to give them the comfort that, hey, it's safe to say yes. It's not a risk. It's sort of, it's a comfortable thing. And that ties into sort of the first rule, which is the ability to execute. So if you can walk in, with partners, like for instance, on the sci-fi thing as an example, I'm working with a partner who's been a producer on a bunch of sci-fi shows, Galactica and many others, who's got a deal there. So there's a built-in comfort level that he sort of vouched for the project, and it happened to be something that they were looking for. But if you can arm yourselves with allies that have experience, with you, and if you can, the more you can demonstrate in terms of execution, like saying, okay, yeah, this is where I want to start, but here's where I want to go. You've got a plan. That's a good thing. The last thing I'd say on this, because I'm talking too much, is there's also, though, a psychological dance you have to do in development when you're pitching things, because oftentimes the execs that you're pitching to have to justify their existence by being involved in the development process. So you want to also make sure you go in there with and this sounds contradictory, but with a balance of asserting a clear and decisive vision, but with the flexibility to collaborate and to allow them to come in and give you notes and feedback and to basically serve them as a client or a partner. And that's a very tricky thing to do, but those sort of management skills are really useful in navigating that process.
Actually, to kind of riff on the whole like pitching to a network thing, a lot of networks, they have different sort of submission guidelines. It's like with I've done a lot of work with Cartoon Network, and they actually had a kind of secret website. And it was some really goofy name. I can't remember it off. I think it's like pigsandrainbows.com or something like that. They change it periodically. But basically, they would post up on that website exactly what it is that they want. It's like, we want monkeys, and they have to be, it's like, we want shows that have monkeys in them, and they have to be like anthropomorphic. For a long time, that's what Cartoon Network wanted. And so, it would have the directions on who to contact, what age group you're aiming for. That's another thing. For children's medium, it's like they tend to be separated into, it's like boys and girls and, ages and whatnot. But then you look at places like Spike TV, or Adult Swim, they actually prefer things that are already out there. They'll get references. Adult Swim, if somebody posts on their forums and says like, "Oh my goodness, this internet show on YouTube is amazing," they actually actively look at those videos, and then they'll kind of judge from there. So yeah, it's interesting. Another thing that I would also kind of point out is that a lot of times when you go to conventions, kind of get an idea of what studios are in the vicinity of those conventions, because 9 times out of 10, a lot of the people from those companies do attend conventions. I mean, I've met most of my contacts through going to conventions, actually. So you just gotta keep your eye out and open for that sort of thing.
And one thing I'd add, because I think Sammy made an excellent point, is that another thing, and this is maybe stating the obvious, but most of these companies, and in television you really have 2 paths. You either can come in through the network, through the channel, the distributor, or through the production studio. And sometimes oftentimes there's crossover, but sometimes they're completely separate. But none of them will talk to you unless you have representation, unless you have an agent, because they're sort of built up a system of gatekeepers to basically, stop from being overwhelmed, but also to try to filter out stuff that's not professional. And of course, that begs the question, how do you get an agent? And that's a challenge. Sometimes you can manage without an agent if you have a manager or a connected entertainment law attorney, or if you build a relationship with a producer or somebody else. So there are different paths, but you kind of need to find either a way to assert your own presence outside of that sort of walled garden on YouTube by doing your own thing, so they notice you and they say, oh, okay, I want to talk to you because you've built an audience, you've established something on your own, or that you find somebody who's got access who can help bring you in. So yeah.
Oh, how about if we go with, you've had your hand up forever.
Now I just have to say, it gives me great existential comfort that the Riddler is about to ask a question. I'm curious to see if it is a riddle.
Okay, say I have an idea for a film adaptation of something.
Aha.
Who do I go to and what do I need?
Well, it's funny you asked that, since we are adapting a book by author Tad Williams. Excuse me. There are different paths, and the first question is whether the property you want to adapt is in public domain or not. There are a lot of public domain properties, and you can Google and find out whether something's in public domain, more or less. If it's not you know, less than 100 years old, it likely is not yet public domain.
Yeah, I
It's a
might
long story.
point out Disney started by,
Yeah.
it's like going after public domain. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
Cinderella,
Disney spends
Snow
a
White.
lot of money, companies like that, to basically keep pushing copyright laws to extend when things go into public domain. And Warner Brothers, because they do not want Superman to become public domain or Mickey Mouse, and they want to own those as long as they can. That's a whole other entertainment law issue. But if it's something that's not in the public domain, then it's a matter of finding out who the rights holders are. If it's a book, for instance, typically the author will be the rights holder. Sometimes it's the writer and/or publisher, depending on the deal. And then you've got to find a way to contact them. And then through literary guilds, kind of book agents and stuff, there are ways to kind of find those contacts. It takes some research. Going through straight to the publisher is not a bad idea. Again, this is not a bad thing to have an agent or an attorney to help you with, because they'll just take you more seriously. If you're just somebody off the street who's like, hey, I want to go get the rights to the book, that does happen. But it's harder. But I think if you show real passion, if you show real understanding of the property, and if you show you have a plan, that certainly helps. But I think that you've got to think it through before you take that step. If I had a third rule, it'd be, a lot of people are like, how do you get in the door in general in the business? The challenge is not getting in the door. There are lots of doors if you're persistent. The challenge is staying in the door once you've gotten through, because sometimes you get one shot. Guillermo del Toro, who I mentioned, one of the things that still rings in my head that he said many years ago is that opportunity is a bridge that burns behind you. So that everyone's sort of path, and opportunity is unique to his time and place and situation. And when you've got it, you get it, but you can't necessarily replicate it. You can't necessarily go out and go in again, because that's it. Like, you got to grab it and go. So the more prepared you are about, okay, I want to license this property, but what am I going to do with it once I get it? And to be able to articulate that plan and demonstrate that helps you a lot too. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, if it's a book, if it's a comic, I'd start by going through to the publishers. And again, if you have an attorney or an agent, that just arms you with a little more credibility.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh,
How do you protect your intellectual property or what you're pitching from somebody else who's not?
That's a good question.
That's a great question.
Do you want to take it, or do you want me to?
I guess my big thing is that whenever we have any story ideas that we're like, we want to make this into a video game, we're very careful about who we talk to. We're it's almost like paranoia. We're like constantly looking around and we're like, oh, okay, anyone here? Okay, let's talk.
It's not paranoia so much as being picky. But the first thought that comes to mind when I heard that is that, yeah, you should do basics. You should, register with the Writers Guild. Even if you've got final draft, you can do that in the menu and automatically register your script online. It's a modest fee. That's sort of the standard in the industry, and whether you're writing any script or whatever. I'm resisting the urge to get up and do Gangnam style dance. I haven't, stretched yet today though. But one of the main thoughts that comes to my mind is that people are not looking to steal ideas. It's easier for them to buy it, because if they've got to take the idea, they're still got to execute it and whatever. They're looking for people who can do that. So a lot of people are like, oh, people are going to steal my ideas. And the other thing is that more likely than not, whatever idea you've had, a million other people have had it.
Yeah.
There are billions of people with brains who think most of the time during the day, and ideas pop in their heads. So I wouldn't be too precious or paranoid, because again, it's not really about the idea, it's about the execution of the idea. And the first step of execution is demonstrating it in the script. And if you execute the idea well, that's what's going to get people excited. But yeah, do the basic protection. Writers Guild registration is just basic. And then you should be fine. But I wouldn't lose sleep over that. I would be more focused on executing it well. Well, here's the tricky thing. I'm sorry. There's a predisposition against original ideas because of the rule I mentioned before, which is fear. So, with rare exception, if you're Chris Nolan, you can do Inception and get $200 million to do it. But if you're not, there's like people are going to be like, no. They like what's called unaided awareness, which is basically a pre-established brand that they don't have to start from scratch to sell you on, that you already know. So that's why they make movies like Battleship.
Because everybody knows the game.
Because yeah, and that's kind of stupid. But the good thing is that enough original things get made that keeps that door open. Because if they can find a fresh new thing that's great, that's good. But the initial predisposition, you've got to get over that hurdle, because they're going to say, oh well, how is this? What is it like, or whatever. One of the real cool tricks, and actually Ted Elliott and Terry Rossi, who I mentioned earlier, is how do you take something that has an awareness, but yet really do something original and creative with it. That's kind of the thing that everybody's looking for the most. But if you have an original idea, as Sammy mentioned earlier, one of the great things, paths to start, is to start asserting that idea on whatever platforms are available to you. So even if it's a short, even if it's getting it on YouTube, a comic book, anything like that, that adds additional leverage to you, and it kind of brings you out into the world and starts turning you into an established brand. As you can build any sort of following that puts you ahead of the game, where they're like, oh, well, they've already started some of the legwork. They've already moved this ball down the field some, and it's less heavy lifting or work or risk for them to do in terms of demonstrating that this will connect with audiences, even if it's small. So that's, I think that, and now more than ever, it's easier to do that. It's easier to manifest your ideas and get them out there in one way or another. So.
Oh. I love your hair.
I envy your hair.
Oh my goodness! Hey, Elaine. I totally couldn't recognize you.
I almost wore that on my head today.
She's a fantastic artist.
It's evident.
You have a comic and you've already separated yourself from the rabble.
Yeah.
The artwork or prints or whatever that's in the artist alley, for a con. I know that if you want to go to have like an animated feature of your comic made, some financial backing or pitching, addition to that, what's the average cost for what you want to do if you had the opportunity to do so?
Okay. I'm going to tackle this one. Okay, so typically when you decide, it's like, I'm going to take my comic and I'm going to make it into an animated project. You have to take into consideration whether it's going to be 3D or if it's going to be 2D. 3D, the best kind of way to think about it is that to get an animation studio on board, you have to kind of look into how much is it going to cost per second. 2D is a little bit easier, and it tends to be a little bit cheaper. The way I like to think of it is it takes an animation approximately between 24 and 30 drawings to make 1 second worth of animation. And so, for a living wage, a person likes to be paid a little bit more than minimum wage, and an animator can get through, a good animator can get through approximately 30 seconds of pure animation, drawing from rough drawing to cleaned up to colored drawing, roughly about 10 to 30 seconds per day, and that's like an 8-hour to 9-hour workday. So if you have a project that you're like, okay, I want to have 4 characters, and I want the animation to be about 1 minute long, then you can theoretically do the math It's like you'll know how many animators you'll need, and then you'll figure out how many, it's like man hours it's going to take. But roughly, if you want a really quirky, flash animation sort of thing done, per minute, it could be somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. But if you're looking at more fluid Disney quality animation, that could be around 1,500 to 2,000 per second. Because you have to take into consideration the quality. If you can factor in all those numbers and figure out how much it's going to end up costing, or at least a general idea of how much you think it's going to end up costing, then you can approach like animators that you might know, like me, me. And then because animators, oftentimes we work from project to project on a contract to contract basis, and so you can actually approach animators and kind of negotiate on prices. Or you can get a quote from different studios, and then from there, maybe I know a lot of the animation shorts are funded through Kickstarter.
I was going to say that. I think if you've got an established following with a comic, like looking at, say, hey, we want to do a test, a short, to demonstrate how this could work as animation, and maybe rally your readers on Kickstarter, that's a pretty great place to start. And just a few years ago, that wasn't even possible. So that's a pretty cool thing to do. But I think rallying people around who are fans and calling in resources, raising a little bit of money, not necessarily starting with, okay, we're going to start with a feature, but we're going to incrementally kind of step by step get there. A friend of ours we know named Lucas Martel did this short called Pigeon Impossible. You can find it on YouTube. It's got like millions of views. And he spent like 3 years making it or something.
And it's a 3D animation. The animation, the quality is
yeah,
I
it's
would say
really great.
very
The pigeon
comparable to
animation,
Pixar.
I mean, kills me. I think it's brilliant. But it's gotten him a lot of attention in the industry, and it's optioned by a studio I can't mention yet because that's not announced. So yeah, I think that's a path that has examples of success. But yeah, I would just try to be strategic about not climbing the mountain, but start by climbing the hill. You don't have to do everything up front at once. It's like look long term and like what's within reach that I can do now, and that moves it farther along. Even if you've got concept art, the more things you arm yourself with in the property to help kind of get people to see it and pitch it helps a lot.
Yeah.
So.
And Kickstarter is also like really great for live action movies and for comics to get comics published. 2 examples of people you guys might know. There's Amelie Belcher and then there's E.K. Weaver. They both started a Kickstarter and they were able to raise thousands of dollars just from fans putting in money to be able to publish their own mangas. And then also it even runs for bigger studios. Troublemaker, Elizabeth was able to raise $40,000 for a live action feature using Kickstarter as well. So definitely worth looking into. Ooh, I know that you've already asked a question. How about we start off with you in the back? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm currently working on a story about a character who's like a Mel Brooks of superheroes.
Okay.
But I know it's not ready yet. Is there some way or someone I can go to help get all the kinks and flaws out before I pitch it to someone?
Yes, but the how to get to them is the challenge. Some screenplay competitions will give you feedback. I think screenplay conferences, Austin Film Festival has a companion screenplay conference that's very good, has a lot of good speakers and opportunities to get input and feedback. But I think finding people within your network and online that you can reach to who will be willing to give it a read is I mean it's one of those things. It just depends on what the reach of your do you know somebody who knows somebody. Can you start putting that out there? And even if it's people who are not in the industry, but people who are, literary minded, or, fans of the same things you are, who are, have good kind of critical skills and stuff. I think the more eyes you kind of put on it, the more feedback you get, is a good thing. I mean, typically, for stuff that I'm doing, and this is a general kind of piece of advice, is that you don't necessarily need, if you're looking for praise, that's not really as constructive as looking for like people to find out, okay, what's not there yet, and so that's the thing I'm always looking for, is to find people who are just not going to be nice to you, but who are going to actually give you some constructive criticism. Yeah. But I think going to screenplay conferences, and there's screenplay forums online you can get into. Even Amazon has a screenplay competition thing that's sort of crowdsourced with feedback, where you can put your stuff out there and then people will read it and give you notes. That might be worth looking at. So yeah, I mean, there are resources out there, and I'd say, yeah, start putting stuff out there. Be prepared for for feedback to be harsh, but really take that as only use what you think is smart. I mean, you don't have to take all the advice. Some advice you get will be bad, but be open to it and look at it as an opportunity to grow and to really challenge kind of your kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah, another place that would probably really help. I'm guessing that most of you guys are native Texans, except for maybe like one or two of you. Okay. Governor Rick Perry actually has. They have what's the website called? Governor Rick Perry has the Texas Film Commission website, and on there, they always have listings and dates for special competitions. There's like workshops that they post up schedules for. That is a fantastic resource that you guys can all go on to. They even have everything from if say for instance you're shooting a live action film and you need to find a location, it'll have like a list of different resources and how to contact different locations, so that way you can have some help doing some scouting. There's weather reports that they have on there, so that way it's like what kind of crops are growing in a specific area. If it's like I need to have a cornfield, it'll say the best times of the year for that, and it's like what the height will be of that corn. It's a fun little website to go through. Yeah. But definitely start looking on that website.
And Austin Film Festival that I mentioned earlier, their screenwriters competition or conference, they have a competition and a conference, is one of the best in the country, and that's next month in October. So if that's not on your radar, that probably should be too.
So, next question. You had one, right?
I was actually just going to throw out, you're talking about Kickstarter?
Yes.
Just some alternatives, because Kickstarter has some kind of quirky requirements.
Yeah, Indiegogo is another good one.
Indiegogo and also Chip-In.
Chip-In.
Are good
Okay.
stories.
Yay.
I remember for animation we had mytunes.com. That was a fun one, but that didn't last very long. Oh, okay. Yes.
A bit of a question, because you were telling her about how much animation costs per second for like the good stuff, like the Disney stuff was $1,500 to $2,000. How much did you say for the less fluid?
Well, you can find an aspiring animator, and a lot of times, it's like, see, I'm of the opinion that if somebody's going to be working many hours on a project for you, you should compensate them. There's some people that will do it for free, but you get what you pay for, and it's not fair to them. So it's like if it's somebody that's like brand new, just out of school, maybe 500 for it's like sort of animation, more like animatics per se. But from there, it's they'll have they'll have a number in mind. If they've been doing animation for a while, they'll kind of spout out some numbers for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, one thing, if you're serious about it, I mean, here in Dallas, there are animation studios, large and small, that do computer animation and Flash and everything else. And you can find those on the Texas Film Commission website. They'll list, resources for production companies and vendors and animation companies. So I would do some research and basically find, what are the local companies that do animation. Check them out online, check out their websites, look at their work, and reach out to them and see if you can get a quote. Get a bid and get a few if you can, and sort of approach it kind of as a producer. And then that'll give you a framework and some comparison, and then kind of arm you with the information you need to maybe then go launch this on Kickstarter and say, okay, this is what I need to go do this. And we found great people who can do it.
Yeah, another good website. If you're thinking about animation specifically, is the Animation World Network. .com, so awn.com or animationworldnetwork.com. They have a specific subsection of that website called aidb.com, which is the Animation Industry Database. So it lists everything from schools that teach animation to individual freelance animators to different types of animation studios and whatnot. Unfortunately, it is up to the different studios and freelance artists to keep their information updated. So you might run into the whole thing of like, oh, this website doesn't exist anymore when you click on
This person is dead.
yeah, so that happens occasionally, but aidb.com is a really good resource. So it's awesome. Ooh, any other questions? How much time do we have left? Okay, awesome. Okay, sir.
Maybe 15.
You mentioned, hold on, you mentioned Pigeon Impossible. I want to make sure that I got that right.
Pigeon impossible. Yes.
Yeah.
A subtle but important distinction. Yes, sir. All right, I just have to ask, do you work in law enforcement? Okay, I'm just. Even better.
When you're talking about, writing and adapting properties, do you think there's any chance Hollywood might actually do that, considering that Battleship and John Carter were big failures?
They will never give up on it. No. Not until they all die. Yeah. Although there are a couple things that have been shelved. So, but stuff comes and goes. But yeah, I mean, Michael Bay's trying to make a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie where they aren't actually turtles or teenagers or mutants or ninjas, they're aliens. Why make it? Yeah. There was a Ouija board movie in development. I don't know how but I don't know if that's still getting made. Like, it's just everything. Like, it's just crazy and stupid. It's like a joke, but it's real. It's a very strange place.
Ooh,
Well, this was much smaller, but it always kind of bugged me about the film industry. But
Only one thing?
yeah. But coming to where there's so much that's in season or that is in liking by the populace, and then
Like Cantaloupe.
but then there's
Sorry.
The trends that are following. How do script writers and film companies, how do they keep up with that before it fades out when they can get something?
Yeah, that's a losing battle. I mean, it kind of goes to the whole fear thing, is that there's a tendency in Hollywood amongst execs and people making decisions to follow more than to lead. So it's about, oh, what's hot now? We got to go make more of that. So we keep getting vampire movies and zombie movies and all sorts of stuff. And as long as they keep making money, even if many fail by the wayside, they're basically being enabled by us, the audience that's buying those tickets, to do more. So it's easier said than done to just get everybody to say, okay, we're going to stop supporting those things. I mean, the flip side of that too is that there are good movies that deserve to do well that don't. So you've got kind of problems on both ends and both sides of the coin, and those messages week to week get kind of amplified in the very insular kind of Hollywood echo chamber, where it's sort of the superstitious voodoo where they're like, oh, well, this movie did bad at the box office, so that means we don't want movies like this anymore. For years, pirate movies were like, no, you can't make a pirate movie. No one wants to see pirate movies. And then Pirates of the Caribbean came out, and it like just changed the perception. But we haven't been seeing a whole lot of pirate movies, which is kind of weird. It's kind of an anomaly. But like westerns come and go, space, comes and goes. It's a weird, bizarre kind of organism unto itself. So, but yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, one of my directors that took me under his wing when I was younger, his name is Sam Fleming. He was one of the head animators for Don Bluth Studios, but also for Disney for many years. He was actually he was the assistant to Ollie Johnson, who was one of the original 9 Old Men of Disney. He actually explained to me that cycles tend to go in a 9-year cycle. So when one thing becomes popular, it's like another thing kind of drops down, but then slowly it kind of revolves around and it will eventually come back, sort of thing. Then that goes from everything from like superhero movies to zombie movies and
to Disney animated musicals that
Yeah,
were coming
Disney.
every year, and now they're not. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all part of a cycle, the circle of life. So, oh yes, question.
I had a question about experience maybe y'all have had of somebody pitching something to you, and maybe the initial impression you got was not, like you were all ready to blow this person off, and then at the end you were like, this was a great presentation, and you were on board with it. What would somebody like, or maybe what did somebody do? Is there a situation like that where initially you were blowing them off, and then after a while you were like, after they got into their presentation, and what did they do to kind of
Usually if it starts bad, it stays bad or gets worse. And then you want to just get out as soon as possible. But I do empathize with your, and I think there's always the wish that it's going to be good, that there's going to be some surprise. And I think the closest thing I can say to that is that something that sometimes, you'll hear something that starts like, okay, I've heard this all before. Oh, it's another zombie movie, like we need that, or whatever it is. And it starts just like, okay, I'm already bored. But then there's a twist. Then it's like, okay, we start by doing something that looks like this, or that is familiar, but then we've got a whole new, we're taking it in a whole new direction, or a whole new take. And that's actually a pretty good formula. Because kind of back to your point too about the trends, this weird kind of dichotomy that the studios and people have is that they want to strike this balance between the familiar, where it's something that's, okay, I know what that is, I like that, I want to see it again, with something new and original. And there's inherent conflict in the two, but the trick is to find a way to reconcile those two. So it's something that has a comfort level, has some familiarity, but is a twist. I mean, Shaun of the Dead is a great example of that. So it's like, this is something that took a zombie movie, put a whole new twist on it. And every once in a while you get, something like that. That's refreshing and unexpected. So yeah, I think it's, it's good to be open to stuff because you never know. But yeah, more often than not, it's just, if it starts bad, it just sad. It just gets worse.
Yeah, a lot of times I'm kind of, I can be a little bit standoffish when it comes to like somebody approaching me for a project. A lot of times I actually prefer it when somebody vouches for that person. Case in point, for Tail Chaser. Our lawyer actually approached me and was like, hey, it's like, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to listen to this girl, and she's got a project. I think you should listen to it. So already I'm like, okay.
And someone with no produced credits.
Yeah. It's like she's never written before in her life. So she came in and she started off with the whole, imagine this. Which to me, if you say imagine this, I'm gonna be like, that was already I was ready to write her off. But I was there as a favor, and I was there because she was willing to buy the food. I like to do mine whenever there's a pitch. You know, I like to get something out of a pitch. If I'm giving my time to listen to something.
Gelato.
Yeah, gelato. Yes, it was actually gelato that we had.
Never underestimate the power of gelato.
And so I was sitting there, and I was like, really? You know, what are your credentials? You know, it's like, what have you done before? And she was like, oh, it was a cat movie, blah, blah, blah. And it was like a airplane coming in for like a crash landing.
Pitching and writing are very different skills.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be good at one of them, much less both. And one of the problems is that when you're pitching, you've got to separate between everything that's in your head that's already got you excited and that you think is great versus what's in this other person's head.
Yeah.
And sometimes people, when they pitch, they presume too much of the other person. And it's like, okay, you're telling me this, but you haven't told me this, and I don't know, why do I care about this? One of the best rules of pitching, there's this guy, Guy Kawasaki, who used to be the chief evangelist for Apple back in the old days of Apple. And he gave there's a great talk of his on pitching online. You can Google it and find the video. It's actually really cool to watch. And it's more for tech startups, but a lot of it is applicable to this. And in one of his talks, he says, whenever you're pitching, imagine some, you know, I was going to use a bad word, but not a happy, friendly person on your shoulder that after everything you're saying says, so what? So what? Why do I care? And that's what you've got to do, is because you've got to presume that the person you're pitching to is thinking that. And so when you say something, you've got to be able to cross that bridge about, okay, this is why you care. This is why this matters. You know, this is why this is cool. You can't just presume that they're going to magically, like, just, you know, drink the Kool-Aid. It takes work. And part of that also is being responsive to and being attentive to the audience. You know, because right now, in that moment when you're pitching, you know, it's not about the people who are going to buy the tickets or the theaters that are going to book the movie or the, you know, distributors that are going to stock it, you know, on the shelf at Walmart or whatever. It's about this one person. That's your audience. And so oftentimes one of the worst mistakes I see people making when they pitch, they're not paying attention to me. They're not reading my reactions or my responses, and they're just kind of like in their own world. And I'm just like, I'm sure that's a nice place where you are, but I so don't care. Like, why are you here? I can be doing other things, you know. And yeah, so being engaging with the person and being willing to adjust and respond to what they react to if they're kind of not getting something or whatever, you know, that's a good thing. But you want to paint this picture where it's like you're getting them excited, hopefully you're excited too, but you're being coherent and you're kind of, you know, walking them through the story, almost like you are the movie trailer, you know, for what you're showing, what you're pitching, and hopefully a good movie trailer.
Yeah, and another thing is, I like when somebody's describing a project to me, I like it when they take, you know, it's like, I'll ask, you know, what is your project like? And if you sit there and you take, I actually got pitched just a couple of days ago from a Disney animator. Basically he was like, it's a dark comedy, but like Breaking Bad. And so I was like, okay, so a comedic Breaking Bad. That was a very good sort of description for it. You need to come up with a very nutshell statement of what your project is. That helps.
Yeah, that's sort of a basic Hollywood rule, is like start with that, you know, it's this meets this. It's this, but like this. One of the things we sort of crassly have done with Tail Chaser is like, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings with cats. You know, it's just to kind of set the table for them, so they've got a starting point where they're okay. They've got an anchor that's like, okay, now I have a little nugget of something that then you can build on and then you can elaborate on. Because the longer you wait to give them that kind of grounding, that sort of foundation, you're going to lose them. So the more you can kind of punch them in, not like literally punch them, but hit them with something that's very clear, as a starting point, and then build on it, and then elaborate. That helps. And we should wrap up, but we should let's. sneak
Can
a
I
couple.
say one of my favorite taglines real quick?
Please do. I'm tempted to share my tagline for sci-fi, but I don't know if I want to share that yet.
This is a project, we can't talk about it, but one of the projects that we were kind of working on was Han Solo stuck on Middle Earth, but his phaser doesn't work.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
this
it's
is-
like,
This is a puzzle for you to figure out what that is, because it's a licensed property and something we were percolating with a producer friend of mine who has the property. It's a book. That's all I'll say. But yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, it's like I kind of want to see that. Okay, we're gonna do 2 fast ones, or 3. Okay, we'll go this way, I guess. So we'll see.
So like, what if somebody sees, like say somebody, a writer from Star Wars, sees your character and says, hey, that reminds me a lot of Han Solo, and then he approaches you and says, I don't want you to use that character.
Well, as long as it's not Han Solo. I mean, Firefly is Han Solo. That's like the whole concept was that what is Han Solo's story? We're going to tell that, but it's Firefly. Like it's not like no one's mistaken that for Star Wars. It's its own thing. So yeah, I mean, you don't want to just because you'll get sued. You can't just take other people's characters and do what you want, unless they're in the public domain. So like CBS went to Stephen Moffat and said, hey, we want to do a U.S. version of Sherlock because it's genius. And they said, no, we're focusing on the U.S. thing. And then CBS said, okay, and they're doing Elementary, their own, modern day Sherlock, except now Watson is a woman. So yeah, but they can do that. I mean,
yeah, they are.
yes. Well, there it's Sherlock, but House is Sherlock Holmes. House and Wilson are based on the Sherlock Holmes and Watson relationship. That's what that show is, except he's a doctor, and he's more of an asshole. But but that's the show. It's like taking something that people know and they love, but finding a new twist and a way on it. And that ran for 8 seasons or whatever, and made a lot of money, and is really good, and it stands on its own. One thing I was going to mention that actually to you is that the Warner Brothers Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr., that was set up, that was pitched with a comic book. Not a comic book you can buy, but the producers were pitching Warner's on Sherlock, and they weren't getting it. They were like, Sherlock Holmes, why do we, it's going to be boring. They're thinking of the Basil Rathbone things. They couldn't get the concept of this reimagining, which you can agree or disagree with how good it is. So he hired on his own a comic book artist and produced his own comic book just so he could pitch it to the executives. And he gave it to them, and they saw it, and they're like, oh, now I get it. So yeah, that can be, I mean, being able to show in addition to tell can be a very, very powerful thing.
Yeah.
So, and you had a quick question.
Well, they're like storyboards for these.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
My question is, how long do the pitches usually last between like an elevator speech to like 15 minutes, or how long do you give them, and do you ask questions?
You presume you have very little time. And your job in the pitch is to try to earn more time. But I think that I mean, the meeting I had with Sci-Fi, the exec pushed the next meeting back, which is like the dream that you want in a meeting. But you presume that you have very little limited window of time, and that you've got to, as quickly as possible, earn your right to stay there. And again, it's the hard part's not getting in the door, it's staying in once you're there. So it can vary. I mean, it can be just a few minutes. It can be, an hour. Asking questions in terms of what you want, what they want is good, but I think the main thing is to be open and listening to what they want, and answering their questions. So yeah, I think you don't want to go in there with too many questions on your own, because then it kind of makes you sound like, well, you didn't do your homework or you don't know what you're doing. But it does make sense to kind of build a connection with the person and say, what are you looking for? Like, what are the things you really like? So like if you walk into an exec's office and you see the Game of Thrones books on their shelves, that's a good thing. Like, talk about how awesome Game of Thrones is, and you know what? That informs some of what we're doing here, trying to do, and whatever, blah blah. So there are all sorts of stuff like that you can try to do. But again, part of it's just being attentive, but also being considerate the fact that you're the guest there, and you want to respect your host and their time.
Yeah, I typically start off with like a mental, like I'll give a person 5 minutes of my time, and if I'm intrigued, I'll start to ask questions, and the more it's like the more questions I have, then it's like the longer the meeting can go. I've had meetings as long as 6 hours, not joking, but then of course. It also depends on the person that's pitching, because there's some people who, like Paul was saying, are so stuck in their world and they just want to steamroll, all their ideas all in out of you, and there's no
they're
time.
talking about things that don't matter.
Yeah.
Little minutia or details and stuff, and it's like big picture. I think your pitch needs to be big picture. What are the major beats? What are the tell me who the characters are. Where does it start? Where is it going? What's the punchline? How does it end? That helps a lot. And again, remember the guy on your shoulder who's constantly saying, "So what?"
Yeah.
So that you aren't too into it, but you're,
And also know who you're pitching to. I'm a very visual person. If you're going to come up to me with a script and there's no pictures, I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to read that. Also, be considerate. Be considerate of. That's how I got interested in Tail Chaser, was because her speech was a train wreck. But as soon as she showed me the artwork, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But also consider the location. I've been pitched while I was getting onto an elevator, going from one place to another. That's a wrong time to do it.
Unless they're asking you for it. You don't want to impose it on people. You want them to make sure that they're inviting you to do it. Another thing I'd say, just like in screenplays and stuff, if you've got a script and you're getting people to read it, be aware that people are not obligated to read your entire screenplay. They will likely make a decision in 6 pages whether they're going to read any further. So that's something you've got to make sure yeah, exactly, that you're locked up there. So last question, then we got to go see someone else. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Battle and stuff included in it. And I'm kind of on the fence. Sometimes I try to avoid associating with something familiar, but sometimes I just say it's Monopoly with combat.
There you go, medieval Monopoly. Yeah.
So I was just curious, is that appropriate to do when I'm talking?
Yes.
Yes.
I think drawing a connection so they have a frame of reference that they can kind of grasp and get, that's going to move you farther along. It saves time in terms of trying to explain what it is. Because if you were trying to explain Monopoly from scratch, but if you just say it's like Monopoly, like done, like there we go. So yeah, I think the more you can be efficient in communicating your pitch, don't be afraid to draw comparisons and analogies. Make them work for you. Like that's actually generally provides comfort. As long as it's got a twist, as long as it's, not duplicative or redundant, but, a twist. That's a cool idea.
Yeah. But yeah, be careful about which titles you use. It's like actually I've
Don't
gotten
use
this-
ones that are failed or that people hate.
Yeah, failed projects, and then also things that are so like out there that nobody has ever heard of. Maybe like 500 people might know it. Yeah, no, you need something that anybody.
You don't want to pick a reference so obscure that they don't know, and then they feel like you're making them feel stupid for not knowing it. So that's a good thought too. So we have gone a little past, so I think we're going to wrap up and mosey.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all
for
so much.
coming
Great
in
questions.
today.